Hello, and welcome to the first episode in a series I'm dubbing Personal Items. That's right, the luggage puns shall never cease on this channel. I'm hoping this series will be short and sweet videos I'll upload in between reviews. Also, if you're new to the channel, let's face it, you most likely are, definitely check out my other videos and consider subscribing if you enjoy the content. I do want to do a quick shout out to my 2 current subscribers. Don't know who you are, but I greatly appreciate it.
You love me! You really love me!
Okay, enough intro, onto the video. Here are my top 5 games that took me years to finish. Persona 4. Hearing that intro takes me back. This was the first game to introduce me to the series, and I loved it. The duality of teenage life in Japan during the day.
Okay, so let's all open up our Reading is Fun books to page 69.
69.
And the dungeon crawling detective work at night was a fun, novel mechanic to me at the time. It had a great cast of characters, a fairly dark aspect to the story, as well as a gripping whodunit narrative. So why would it take over 4.5 years for me to complete this game? Well, there are a couple of reasons. After about 80 hours of playtime in, I kind of burnt myself out. Not fully utilizing the social aspect of the game led me to spend far too much time grinding out experience in the dungeon. So, I put the game on pause. But with other games to play, that pause became a much longer hiatus. That is until I found out about another little game called Persona 3 FES. And just like that, I was hooked again. After about 100 plus hours to finish 3, I was ready to jump back into 4. But Persona 4 Golden was revealed. So fast forward to the late summer of 2013, I was finally able to solve the case and capture the culprit terrorizing the town of Inaba. Now, as much as I loved 5, 3 and 4 will always hold special places in my nostalgia. 4 for introducing the series, and 3 for cementing it. Grand Theft Auto Vice City. This game transports me back to Christmas holiday in 2002, where at the time you could question whether I was actually old enough to play it. Thankfully, I had a cousin who could, and so I was introduced to the story about the rise of Tommy Vercetti. More so than the brilliantly written and witty plot, the perfect creation of its Miami Vice-inspired open world,
This is for Ricky.
it would be the killer soundtrack that sticks with me today. Even though I never grew up with these 80s hits, I definitely came to appreciate them as they provide a nice backing to the action and mayhem. To this day, I remember cranking hits from Toto and Cutting Crew while cruising down the highway at night in my convertible. Unfortunately, a mix of a short Christmas holiday, some frustrating Vice City missions, and not owning a PlayStation 2 for a while, it wouldn't be until the summer of 2009, approximately 6.5 years later, when I would eventually come across the Grand Theft Auto Trilogy Pack and finish the tale of Tommy Vercetti. As we ever so eagerly approach the release date of this highly anticipated remake, it's fitting that Final Fantasy VII for the original PlayStation would be my number 3. When I originally bought my PlayStation in 1998, there were 3 games I got with it. Gran Turismo, Resident Evil 2, next to my older brother, and of course Final Fantasy VII. And while Gran Turismo and Resident Evil 2 were phenomenal games, nothing hit me quite like 7.
Yo, Taylor, I'm really happy for you. I'm gonna let you finish. But Beyonce had one of the best videos of all time.
Who wouldn't be blown away by that sweeping intro? One of the best video game soundtracks ever, giant ridiculous swords, and equally ridiculous hairstyles. Yes, you can argue that 7 hasn't held up over the years, and that nostalgia can be a blindfold, but for me, it pulled me in like no other game had before. Now I can hear you thinking, if you loved it so much, why is it number 3 on your list? Well, the answer is I moved to America, if you haven't already gathered that from my weird hybrid accent.
Good morning, my neighbors! Hey, fuck you! Yes! Yes! Fuck you too!
Now, I'm not some heartless console abandoner, and I did take my PlayStation with me, but getting my UK PlayStation to operate in the US wasn't feasible for a young teenager. The cost of a step-up transformer and that multi-system DVD VCR player to convert the signal was out of my reach, especially for someone who just jumped onto the Nintendo 64 ship to see what that grass was like. And so Final Fantasy VII kind of slipped away into limbo. There was also that feeling of not wanting to finish the game, that the hype built up in my mind over the years could never be matched, or that finishing it would close a big gaming chapter of my childhood. And while I never got to finish my original playthrough, whose cast of characters were all named after cousins, old friends, and secret school crushes, I would finish a new playthrough about 12 years later. And while it could never match what my childhood imagination had dreamt up, it was both satisfying and sad to indeed close that big chapter from my childhood. And yes, I cannot wait for the remake to come out. Panzer Dragoon Saga was my first proper exposure to RPGs, coming in a few months before Final Fantasy VII. On a lucky day in April 1998, I convinced my mom to buy me the official Sega Saturn magazine at a Tesco's in London.
Can we have a pool, Dad? Can we have a pool, Dad? Can we have a pool, Dad?
Now, this particular magazine was no ordinary edition. This magazine, yes, this very one, contained the first disc of the Panzer Dragoon Saga game. A disc that I've unfortunately and stupidly misplaced since.
You imbecile! You bloated idiot! You stupid fathead! You...
Back in a day when the internet wasn't as widespread, I would follow the chronicles of a game's development through monthly magazines. And I followed this game. I must have played that first disc at least a dozen times. Saga had an excellent battle mechanic of circling your enemies, finding weak spots, and then finishing them off. This is further sweetened by your ability to morph your dragon between desired attributes of agility, spirituality, defense, and attack. I was hooked, and I couldn't wait for the release date. Fortunately, this game suffered the same fate as Final Fantasy VII, a move that would similarly prohibit me from playing it. Now, as I mentioned before, when I moved, I chose to buy a Nintendo 64 over buying another PlayStation or Sega Saturn. For someone who never grew up with a Nintendo, and only owning the original Game Boy, this might not seem like the right choice. However, it was a new game that was too tantalizing for me now. Yes, at the time, I chose Zelda Ocarina of Time over Panzer Dragoon Saga and Final Fantasy VII. Ocarina of Time was no doubt, and still is, an amazing game, and introduced me to the console world of Nintendo. Much like Final Fantasy VII, Panzer Dragoon Saga also slipped away into oblivion, and when I started to get curious about it, its reseller price had climbed significantly and only got worse over time. While recording this, I'm still staggered about how much this game goes for. However, after graduating college and getting a real job, I used part of my first check and plunked down and bought a US Saturn with Saga.
だいぶ流されたな。早く発掘所に戻らないと。だけどこのドラゴン、どうやったら言うことを聞いてくれるんだろう。
Starting up that first disc instantly transported me to the summer of '98, and I was able to finish the game 16 years later. I do highly recommend the game to this day, and it's unfortunate that the price of admission is incredibly high. I hear that emulation for this game is more successful now, and I hope this will allow more gamers access to it. Like Final Fantasy VII, I do hope one day that this game will get its remake. So Saga would have been the longest game for me to finish, if not for my number one slot getting a re-release last year. This was the first game I ever played on a non-handheld home console. And that game is Aladdin for the Sega Mega Drive. I remember picking up the Mega Drive Aladdin bundle, connecting it up, and reliving Prince Ali on the opening level. Now, there's a lot of debate on the superiority between the Sega and Nintendo version. My first experience with a Nintendo home console wouldn't be years later until the N64, so unfortunately I can't comment on the SNES version. What I can say is I remember this game being difficult. Like, really difficult.
Fucking thing sucks!
So challenging that Aladdin became the first game I remember entering a cheat code on. That cheat code was the very awesome level skip code Start ABBA, ABBA Start. This was a great way to skip to that very fun yet frustrating carpet ride level, as well as technically completing the game by cheating. Well, fast forward 26 years later to 2019, and I would probably complete it with no cheat codes or fast forwarding on the Nintendo Switch. I'm not sure if this game was dumbed down since its incarnation on Sega, but this go around didn't feel nearly as insurmountable. Perhaps indeed after all these years I got good. Thinking about this game, I'm not really sure what happened to my Aladdin Mega Drive bundle. I imagine it's sitting in some distant relative's closet or storage. However, wherever it is, I hope it's still kicking in one piece. Guess that means I actually am guilty of being a console abandoner.
You're a monster!
Anyhow, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you actually did, please hit the like button and consider subscribing. I'm hoping to get back into uploading more frequently. Also, if there are any games that took you a while to complete, let me know about it in the comments below. So with that, thanks again for watching, and take care.